Hey everyone, welcome to this live stream Q&A with Jason Fried and David Heinemeier Hansson, co-founders of 37 Signals. My name is Kimberly Rhodes. I'm on the 37 Signals product team. You also might know me as the host of the Rework podcast. Thanks for joining us. I think that we are live in all of the channels. Trying to push this live to Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. We're hoping that that has worked out. Thanks so much for joining us. We're glad that you guys are here. So we're doing something a little bit different today. We have invited a few people to come join us on this live webinar to ask a question directly to Jason or David. A lot of times we're talking about how 37 Signals works. This time we want to dig into other people's business and help them along their journey. So with that being said, I think I'm going to bring on our first guest. That is Sergio from Chile, who wrote in with a question. So let's bring him on in just a minute. Sergio joining us. There he is.
Hello, guys.
Hey. Hey, man.
Hey,
Oh,
Sergio.
God.
Tell us a little bit about you and then go ahead and pose your question to Jason and David.
Yeah. So happy to be here. Thank you for the opportunity, guys. My name is Sergio, and I'm one of the co-founders of Maui. We are a startup in Latin America that helps constructors to manage their budgets and costs. As you can imagine, construction is like complex industry, is very fragmented with a lot of process, and that lets for a lot of potential ideas for features, either by our internal teams or requested by our clients. However, we are a very early stage startup, so resources are limited. Every decision counts on the growth, and we want to stay in business as long as possible as you guys. That can sometimes is kind of overwhelming, to have a lot of ideas and problems to solve, and sometimes we felt that we have to translate everything into a feature. So with all that context, my question is basically how you guys recommend to prioritize features at the early stage, and also what specific questions should we ask as a founders or as a team to determine what should we go first. I hope that makes sense.
It does. I'll start. First of all, you're in the same boat as everybody else, and this should make you feel good. Even companies with 10,000 people and $1 billion have to prioritize and figure out what to do and what's worth doing. So that'll never go away, which is good because the practice you'll have now will be useful in the future. Let me ask you this: is this software you're building just for somebody else, or will you use this in some way yourselves?
No, it's a SaaS platform. Yeah.
But are you in the same industry as the software you're creating? Or are you creating this basically on behalf of customers that aren't you? Like, for example, when we make Basecamp, we use Basecamp. We also make it for other customers.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
No,
will you
we
use
build
this
it
or
for
no?
others.
Okay.
No, we don't use it.
Okay. So it's always going to be a little bit harder because everyone's going to have an opinion, and you don't necessarily know what's the right thing to do next because you can't satisfy your own needs necessarily. I would not listen to individual customers in this case, because everyone's going to take you in a slightly different direction. What you need to figure out is how to feel for the core essentials. And one great way to do this is to kind of talk to a bunch of people about what do they struggle with in their current environment. Like what's really hard? The question I like to ask is, what's hard about your job? And if you kind of do this with 10, 15 people, perhaps you're going to have a pretty good matrix of the kinds of things that really are the struggles that you might want to attack initially. But I would be careful, and I'm speaking broadly here, but I'd be careful to ever follow a feature that someone says, if you had this, I will buy that. That's kind of the road to hell, I think, for you, because once you build that, they'll go, yeah, but if it actually we're wrong, we need this other thing too, and you'll start chasing. You don't want to be chasing. It's your product. You need to really understand who you're building this for and what people really fundamentally struggle with, and focus on those core things. And I can't tell you what they are, but you should get a good feel for them. And if you don't have a good feel for them, I think you're going to be in trouble from the start. So this can't just be a request game. You need to really get a feel for what it is that you're doing and who you're doing it for. Again, general advice, because it's sort of hard. I don't know the industry very well, but that would be my initial sense.
I think one thing to remember here is that people will bring you, as you say, requests for features. That's not actually that helpful. What you need to uncover from that is what problems do they have? Because you, as the product designer, your responsibility is to take 10,000, not 10,000, I don't know how many customers you have. Let's say 1,000 customers are giving you feedback, and the feedback will come in the form of a feature request. But if you kind of crack that feature request open, inside there's a problem. And that problem may very well be the same as the other 5, 10, 20 problems that were stated as other feature requests, which is why you have to embrace this idea that your role as a software developer is not to do what they ask. It's not to implement the features that they want. It is to identify the problems that they're having, and then you will design a feature that solves that in a generic way for a bunch of people. And I think that's one part of it. The other part of it is to be very careful about just listening to customers, because the only customers you'll hear from are the ones you already have. The market is much, much bigger. If you listen too much to the random set, or maybe even worse than random, biased set of early customers who've chosen you, you may very well be taking your product far away from the broad mass of other customers out there. Now, that's hard because obviously top of mind are the people who are giving you direct feedback, but you constantly have to think, do you know what? I need to be the advocate for all the customers who haven't tried our product yet. And these things are sometimes in opposition, especially if you have kind of companies using your product in a way that isn't quite what you're trying to do, but they're trying to use it for that, but they're twisting it. They wanted to do other things that wasn't really in your plans. And you go like, I need to hold on to this customer. So I'm just going to start hammering nails all over the place into their cave to fasten them to. That's not going to make a very appealing product to other people. And you can follow your existing customer base into essentially death and isolation. And you got to be the one who steps back and say like, all right, I heard you. I'll write it down, and then, by the way, I'll throw it out. Don't write down 10,000 feature requests. That's just a long list of stuff that won't be done. Crack open the feature request, see what the problems is, zoom out, take all the problems and go like, well, we're going to solve the 20 generic versions of that, and then think like, also, I've heard from all the customers I already have, I will represent the ones I don't have yet.
The hardest thing, have you launched this yet at all? You've not launched a version yet, or have you?
Yeah, we have already clients.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how long have you been at this? Remind me.
1 year.
1 year. What's hard? Is it really knowing what to do, or is it selling it at all, or like what is the real thing you're really struggling with? Because you're always going to have 10,000 things to do. Like we can't tell you anything to make that go away. So I'm kind of really want to get to what's hard.
What's hard?
Is it saying no? Is saying no hard? Is it like the fact that there's disagreement amongst the team about what to do next? Like what exactly is the hard part?
Yeah, no, I think you get it with the say no part. I mean, sometimes when you're with a client, you are just like seeing dollars, and you don't want to say no because you actually want to keep the client, you don't want churn, or you want to close the sale, whatever happens. And yeah, that's what in the behind the scenes can happen about saying no to requests or conversations or whatever. And we tend to get into this trap of like, now we have to build this because we kind of promise, right?
Okay, so that's what I want to get at. So I think you're promising. You're probably, someone is making promises, some salesperson, or you just don't want to lose someone, or you want to get someone. I'd be very, very careful about making promises. They almost all end in regret, frankly. So I would listen, hear people, be very careful about making promises. Especially when multiple people are making promises. Everyone's trying to close a sale, close a deal, keep a customer. There's another thing that a friend of mine, a friend of ours, Bob Mesta, always says, which is bitching ain't switching. This idea that some people are going to complain. They're always going to complain. Even happy customers are going to complain and say, if you don't do this thing, I'm leaving. They probably aren't leaving if they're happy with the product. They certainly want something more from it, but you don't need to feel like because someone's asking for something, they're about to walk out the door. They could walk out the door too, but I would just kind of calm down. Don't chase. Don't try to appease everybody, but listen in aggregate. Like what Dave was saying, you got to listen in aggregate and innovate on behalf of the customer base as a whole, and don't chase individual customers. That can be a tricky thing. By the way, last thing I'll say about this, I know we probably have to move on. I'm not sure how long we're giving. This is the first time we've done this.
doing great.
Okay, cool. Is I don't know what your pricing model is, but if your pricing model is set up in a way where certain customers can pay you a lot more than other customers, you're basically always going to be chasing the highest paying customers. You're always going to be nervous about losing them. And like David said, you're going to sort of chase this small group into isolation. I like to think of it as an elevator. There's a certain point where the elevator is too high off the first floor that new customers can't get in. And you're going to ride these existing customers to the top, but that's all you're ever going to get. So I'd be very careful. I would think about ways to equalize your pricing in a way where no one customer or 5 customers or handful of customers can dominate you and tell you exactly what you need to do. Otherwise, you're going to be living in fear, I think, the whole time.
Yeah, that makes sense. Probably just one other thing about like going deep into the request. What do you think we could like start digging into to get more deep? Because it's kind of hard to get something from people sometimes, at least for me, right? Like to get the real pain, like to get the real pain instead of just think on the feature.
Well, I think a lot of that has to do with what questions you ask. So if it's just like, what feature are you missing? Wrong question. You know, like, or what do you like or dislike about this feature? Wrong question. The right question is like, what's hard? What can't you do? What are you struggling with? What frustrates you? Where do you feel like there's dead ends? Like, don't even use the word feature. I think once you start to do that, people only think in context of what they can see and what exists. And then they sort of, you're too close at that point. You're not really able to solve the bigger problem because you're just too close to the things that exist already. So I would stay away from I wouldn't ask at all about features. I'd ask about their day. What are you doing? What's hard? What do you struggle with? What are people challenged by? Then you go, oh, I see. And then you come up with ideas from that.
I mean, this is the old adage of customers are going to ask for a faster horse, right? You can be in the business of trying to get the faster horse out there, but you want to be in the business of coming up with the car, right? You want to be in the business of solving a transportation problem, not my mode of transportation or how do you get rid of horse shit, right? Like that was a big problem when everyone was riding horses. Like there's too much horse shit and you could focus narrowly on that problem, trying to scoop it up quicker, or you could just get rid of the manure producing machines and replace them with something else. And that's your responsibility.
Right. Thank you, guys.
We're going to wrap it up there. Sergio, thank you for joining us. I'm going to bring out our next guest, which is actually a twofer. We have co-founders who are joining us, Coy and Kyle from New York City.
Hello.
Hey, guys.
Hey, Jason.
Welcome,
hey, David.
welcome.
Hey, guys.
Cool. So we're two.
Where are you calling from, by the way? We should find out where everyone's from.
New York City.
New York. Cool.
Yes. Yep. So yeah, we're two best friends. We wanted to work together for the next 30 years. And I recently shut down a VC-backed company, and Kyle left big tech because we want to work for ourselves, not investors or middle managers. And we're both technical, so we've been running an LLC like agency to make profitability similar to you two, but now we're interested in finding our base camp.
Yeah.
So
recently
you're trying to figure out what to build. Oh, go ahead. Sorry. Yep.
Oh yeah, just some more context. Like we've recently just been kind of digging into various threads, like just kind of reaching for people in our network, just kind of look at where there's opportunity, prototyping, kind of shipping MVPs and just getting ourselves out there. It does feel like distribution's quite tough, and it almost feels like there's like kind of software everywhere now, and the bar seems higher than it's ever been for really finding opportunities. So we're kind of in a place where we're wondering what like a good strategy is for where we're at. Like we're considering embedding ourselves into like companies of people that we have access to friends companies to see how they work and all that stuff, or maybe continue freelancing to collect better data about business problems.
Yeah. So were you all ever in this position early on at 37 Signals, and what would you do in our shoes?
Yeah. So when we started 37 Signals, we didn't set out to search for a product to build. We were a web design company, and we found ourselves needing something. We were managing projects primarily via email, via in-person meetings, basically the way things are still done today. I know there's a million project management tools, but still most people are just emailing or using WhatsApp or chatting. Stuff's all over the place, scattered, don't know who's doing what, don't know when things are due. Things are dropping through the cracks, the whole thing, right? This was what we were running into. And so at that point, you're like, we need something else. We need something that doesn't lead to those outcomes. And we couldn't find anything on the market that we liked. We didn't look around that much, but there's only a few things at the time. And so we built our own thing to solve our own problems and to deal with our own stuff without really initially thinking it was going to be a product or a big product for others. It was like, what do we need? In fact, the first version of what became Basecamp was simply a manually updated weblog or blog, basically. And we would just update this web page with like updates for a client to see at a certain URL. I mean, it was as simple as that. And we realized this is pretty good. Doing this manually sucks. We need to automate this. And we kind of got somewhere and came up with this idea and kept going with it. So for us, and I would just say the best advice I have for anybody is to build something that you need. Now, you may not need anything right now. Sounds like you're searching for something to build. That can work. I'll just tell you, it's a lot harder. It's a lot harder because you're judging quality and fit by proxy. You're like asking people what they want and asking people what they need and trying to observe to find problems. Now, there's some places where that would definitely work. I'm sure many products have been built that way, but I think you're gonna have a leg up if you pay attention to the things that you've always wanted and you need, and it might come from your agency. So my suggestion would be to maybe do more work, freelance, and maybe just see is there something in that area, that area really well. Is there an opportunity there? I don't know. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. But that's I mean, it's not like great advice for you in a sense because it doesn't help really in the short term, but I do think you're gonna have a better shot at finding a good fit if you really have this itch that you must scratch yourself versus imagining what other people's itches feel like. That's kind of my general point of view.
I'd say the other place to look for problems is with the customers you already have. What actual industries are they in? If you're working on something on their behalf, is there a bespoke piece of software that they're trying to get you to build that could be a generic piece of software that actually they are very representative of an industry problem and they're just going to try to solve it for a one of one? Then you could solve it for a one of many. That's a good place to get intimate with a problem. Because I think the main thing here is you have to either the two of you have to get intimate with a problem that you are able to solve and care enough about that it can drive you forward. Or the other alternative is, I mean, I don't usually say this, but there are many people out there who are very intimate with problems who don't know how to build things. And it is possible to ally up with it. It is absolutely a snake pit, and you can find a lot of vipers in there that are not worth your time at all. But there are also plenty of examples in history of essentially great builders pairing up with people who have good ideas and are able to drive them forward. And it's not really good ideas. It is finding someone who has a problem, who owns the problem, who knows the problem. Software development used to talk a lot about this, like the stakeholder, whatever Agile used to call this, because a lot of Agile grew out of exactly your situation. Consultants doing something on behalf of someone else. And they realized, just as Jason says, you need someone in the group who knows the problem and who can own the problem. And finding individuals like that, I guarantee you, the hard part is not going to be able to find those people. There's literally thousands, millions of them. The hard part is discerning who you want to actually work with. But it is a way to sort of get close to a problem, because really that is your problem. Your problem is to get close enough to a problem that is not oversaturated, and you need to find that from somewhere. So either you find it from someone who's already done that work, they've gotten close to the problem, or you get close to the problem through your clients. Or it'll just come up in your normal course of work. But I will say, I think it's fair to say that that's the way we've done it. That way is far more saturated now than it ever was. Like coming up, for example, and say like, oh, my problem is project management or to-do list or something else. Like, not saying you can't do it. I'm just saying that's a really crowded space at this point. And there's so much more software out there that needs to be made. Jason had a great example the other day that inspired him to post about a visitor management software for the place he lives, right? Someone is close to that problem. Someone knows the customers, they know who to talk to, they know all those things. And unfortunately, that someone paired up with an absolutely awful, well, I shouldn't say awful. I'd say the result of what they did was very poor, right? Like really poor software. Let's imagine that you had this problem. You had a client, you were building something on their behalf. That's a problem you could productize, and you could beat them on quality almost assuredly, because that looked like just an awful piece of software. So it's some of those niches, and those niches can be extremely profitable in a way that the red ocean of another to-do list or another whatever programmer check-in thing, it has a difficult time of being.
I would also add that, like, the problem you have right now is actually an interesting problem, which is like you're two capable guys who are looking to solve a problem. You want to build a product. Is there something in that? Now, I know there are like freelance, like matchmaking kind of style things where people can like, there's a whole bunch of these things, right? Fiverr, I don't even know what they're all called. Upwork, this kind of thing, right? Are they good? I don't know. Maybe there's an opportunity to do something there. Maybe not. I have no idea. Maybe it's about location. It's like, maybe it's regional. I don't really know. But that is something right now. You're telling us a problem that you have. Is there something that could be built to help you solve that problem? Perhaps, perhaps not. I don't know. You can, throw it out if it's no good, but that's the kind of mindset you kind of want to twist a little bit and go, well, actually, why am I talking to these two guys? I'm asking them a question about this thing where we don't know what to build. Well, that's a problem we have. Is there something there? What are the other things you might go through, in that respect to maybe mine for something? But I generally think that what'll end up happening is you're just going to be hit by lightning with an idea. Something's just going to versus mining for one. I don't know. I mean, maybe, yeah, maybe, right? But oftentimes it's like, oh my God, this is necessary. Like we need this, or we just saw this and it's terrible, or we just came up with this. That's typically how this stuff goes. And I think if you almost work too hard at trying to find the thing, it's going to be quite elusive. So I would just keep freelancing for a bit here, pay your bills and at the same time, do what David was talking about and do what I may be talking about, what you guys know. And it might be a year, it might be 2 years. You don't need to rush into this either if the great idea isn't there yet, but keep working, keep practicing, keep honing, and maybe something will bubble up.
I'd also say just one last thing. Yep. You should also just start building, whatever it is. It doesn't even really matter. Jason and I, before we stumbled over the Basecamp problem, were working on single file, a thing for managing your books. That did not turn out to be a major commercial success, but it was very damn helpful for honing the skills we then needed to create Basecamp, right? So this idea that you can work for clients, and that's awesome, great, that pays the bills, but also work on something for yourself, even if it's kind of halfway stupid, because that's the practice you need for when the good idea actually comes to you, you want to be ready to actually do it. If the great idea comes to you and it's literally your first idea, you're probably going to blow it. You're probably going to squander it. You might spoil it by the fact you've had no practice on some dummy problems, so to speak.
All right.
Super
Perfect.
helpful. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for
Good luck,
joining
guys.
us. Okay, next to our stage is Ingmar, who is joining us from Austria. Coming to the main stage. Here we go.
Hey.
Yes.
Hey, Ingmar.
Hey.
Hello.
Good morning, I guess, for you guys.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm the founder of a company called Trips. We are in the little bit of a niche space of managing or software for managing lodging taxes. This company started in 2020, and actually it was triggered by COVID. I was in another job that fell through because of that. And as of COVID, it also started as a kind of remote company by coincidence, if you like. And it worked really well. I think it still works really well. By now we're 13 people. We have people on the axis of Cape Town to Oslo, I'd like to say, because we use a recruiting platform that has that strategy. We're all in the same time zone. We use all of these obvious tools. But there's also this little thing in me, maybe my old me, if you like. I used to work in traditional companies with managers, with one-on-ones, all that stuff. that tells you how do you keep the thing going, how do you manage the personal relations, but more maybe also how do you cement cohesion and commitment. And I don't think that, for me, my personal idea about commitment is that it really comes from the job, from really liking what you do. I think then it's easy to be committed. Cohesion maybe is a little bit of a human thing, the thing with your teammates and the things that you work together on. What would you maybe say from your experience being a remote company for such a long time? What would be the key success factors to identify in saying this really worked, this didn't work, especially once a company starts growing and you have support and you have operations? Because for me, the thing that you talk about a lot, the teams of 3 or the teams of 2, that is still quite obvious because then you work together closely. But support and marketing maybe and operations is maybe a bit further away from that. So if we can maybe discuss that, that would be great.
David, you want to start with this one?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great challenge and one we actually face ourselves too. During COVID, we had a 2.5-year period where we didn't see each other at all. And atrophy set in. Absolutely, in much the same way as what you're talking about there, that the cohesion of the team is kind of like the glue was getting warmed up and it was coming apart and it was stretching. And what really the number one thing I'd say that helped us through, or not through that, after that, to re-glue was to see each other in person. So this is the thing about remote. Remote doesn't mean remote all the time, year in, year out. We twice a year meet up the entire company in person to kind of make sure that the glue is holding. And I think if you're not already doing that, that's the number one thing I'd say. You have to spend time in person, substantial days in person together, to create those human connections that you then can rely on for the rest of the year. I think the main thing with remote is people think it's either on or it's off. It's either we never see anyone in person or we see everyone in person every day or 3 times a week. There's tons of room in the middle of, I see most of the people here. I see Kimberly, for example. I see her twice a year in person. We see each other on calls like this too, but the in-person stuff has a special part. So first, that's the question. Are you already doing meetups like that?
Yeah, I think it was triggered by that because we met in Valencia 2 weeks ago for an entire week, and it was so great. There were 3 people on the team out of 13 that I've never met before, apart from online, and that human energy really thrived throughout the week. But it also made me realize, hey, we're on a smaller budget probably than you guys are, so maybe we don't have the luxury to do that twice a year. So what kind of mechanisms or other things can we think of in terms of keeping that cohesion alive? And have in COVID, in the consulting firm I work, we did an online wine tasting, just crazy example, but it was great because it was the only thing we could do. So is there anything else that you guys see out of like the in-person meetings that work well?
Yeah, so something we do too is teams typically, it's not required, but typically get together online once a week. Like the design team, usually Thursday mornings, we spend an hour together. And it's not about work. Work can come up, but it's just kind of whatever, right? Social stuff, just talking about the world or themselves or whatever's going on, or some cool watch someone saw or some design thing, whatever. So that team talks about that, and programmers probably have their time, and different people have their time. And once a week is plenty. 1 hour a week is plenty to keep that going as well. We also used to do something way back in the day. We don't do it anymore, but we had this thing called 5x12s, which was this idea of getting 5 people together randomly in the company once a month. So the idea was 5x12. 12 is 12 months a year. That's where the 5x12 comes from. And these people would be picked randomly because we had a much larger company. In your case, I wouldn't do it this way necessarily. But 5 people would be picked randomly to catch up for an hour once a month. And it was nice to cross-pollinate and to talk to people who you hadn't really talked to before and maybe don't work with at all, even though you're in the same company. That was something that we did and was helpful for quite a while. And you could look into doing that sort of thing too. So I think like a few video things dotted here and there once a week, once every 2 weeks is actually plenty to keep that momentum going and the cohesion going. But and if you can only do once a year, I mean, if you're that's even good that you can do that. It is expensive to fly everybody around, but it's probably some of the best money you'll ever spend. So I would really highly recommend at least doing that once, and then doing these weekly or bi-weekly or even once a month dotted video things. And that's that. Because I think going into them with more of a social mindset versus like, we're going to talk like, if you're working on a project together, you might have a Zoom call about it, but it's not the same kind of connection and cohesion as just kind of loosening up and someone talking about like a moose that literally walked in their backyard, or like, so people live in all sorts of different places, and same with your company. People are all over the place. There's all sorts of interesting stories that people want to share. And it's fun to just get to know people on that personal level this way. I think there's a lot more value if you do it that way than if you just meet up for work stuff only.
I think the other thing you mentioned is that some of the cohesion you are seeing that's coming more easily is with people who work together already naturally during the day. And it's between the groups you need a little bit more bonding. One of the things we found is using Basecamp with recurring questions of what you've worked on and what you will work on, and distributing that to the whole team can produce some of those cross-boundary links. Part of the lack of cohesion, I think some folks would identify, is I don't really know what they're doing in operations. I don't really know what they're doing in marketing. As in, I know they do marketing, I know they do operations, but what does that mean? What are the projects? What are the problems? What are the things they're struggling with? Even at 37 Signals, we still do this where everyone writes up every Monday, what are they going to work on for the week? And then at the end of each day, they're being asked a question, what did you work on?
Hey, David, I'm going to share my screen.
Wants to know.
I'm going to share my screen, just show everybody.
Yes.
Here we are. This is a project we have in Basecamp called What Works. This is one of our projects. It's a distinct project, okay? The project has 2 message boards, some to-dos, and this is what David's talking about. So I'm going to go into this, automatic check-ins. Each department is asked every day. So product has this, ops has this, product has this. So if you go to ops, David, is it safe to show ops? I don't know. Is there anything in here that would be whatever? So we go to ops, and this is a journal, a log in perpetuity of everything everybody who works in ops has worked on that they want to share in their own words. There's no AI summaries. There's no to-do list checkoffs. It's like, Farah, how would you describe what you did recently, right? And so here are those things. Here's what Jesse did recently. Here's what Matt did recently. Here's what Paul did recently, right? So people say like last 2, did this over the last 2 days, right? So we ask this every day, but you don't have to answer every day. Some people have bullet lists. Some people write in paragraphs, right? And that's ops. So if you're curious about ops, what's ops been up to? What's product been up to? What's commercial been up to? Let's go to product. What's product been up to? Here's what product's been up to. People share some screenshots, right? And so what's cool is you get to see like what different groups are doing. Now, we've broken this out into individual departments because we have 70 people in the company. We used to have one question that was asked of everybody. This is actually a bit easier for you with what I think you said 13 people or something.
Yeah.
I'd have just one question you ask everybody every day, which is what have you worked on? And then the other thing we ask once a week is what will you be working on this week? So this is an estimate. It's a guess about the things you plan on doing. And so it's a really nice thing to see. So like, what's ops going to be working on this week? Well, here's some of the things, whether or not these are the things that actually happen or not is not the point. It's here's what we think we're going to be working on. So very quickly, and by the way, to make one in Basecamp, you just like, what's the question? How often you want to ask, and who, right? And then at what time? It's a very simple thing. And then Basecamp takes care of the rest. So this is a huge lever for us. There's no status meetings. There's no one like forcing anyone to get together to talk about what they're working on. It's all published here. It's visible to everybody in the company. And as David said, like, if you want to bump into what a different department's doing, just click on that and find out, right? And it's a really nice way to get a sense of, oh, that's what they've been up to, or that's what I've been up to. It's good for writing for yourself and for writing for others. So anyway, that's the automatic check-in feature inside.
We also do this for social questions. We have a question that's a weekly one. What did you do on the weekend?
Yeah.
And that's where more of those, again, overlaps with people you're not working directly with. Oh, so-and-so from ops had whatever. They went on a trip. Here's some pictures about that. Creates just some of that human connection. But yeah.
One particular thing you tried and will never try again? Didn't work?
I'm trying to think of, I think, well, we stopped doing the 5x12s. And I think one of the reasons why for us is it felt a bit contrived. Actually, it was a bit forced. I think that the product team or design team wants to talk to one another, picking 5 random people from across the company. There was some awkward moments that may have been valuable in a sense, but it faded away. And I think you should pay attention to what sticks and what slides away. And don't force the things that just don't work. In that case. But for you, it might be something you might feel like you must do for a while. And then for a while, you don't have to do it anymore. I'm not really sure. I think, again, like David mentioned, I mean, this wasn't really our choice necessarily, but during COVID, we decided not to do it. So I think if you're like on a tight budget, but you can afford it, I think it's still worth doing, even if it's a stretch, versus like putting it off because you don't want to spend the money. I think when you don't spend the money on that, you're probably going to lose a lot more in the end. Because people
No,
aren't
for
seeing each
sure.
other.
It's
Yeah.
more the consideration, will we do it twice a year or at least once a year? I'd rather do twice, but that would be maybe a bit of a stretch.
Another thing I would say real quick is that the automatic check-ins, Basecamp asks them automatically every day, but we've sort of let people know that like a couple times a week is enough. I know some companies have tried this and they've been very militant about every day you got to write in, every day you got to write in, and then people don't like it anymore. And then it's a force, and then they're really short and terse about it because they don't want to deal with it. So you just got to make sure that you find the right place where you're getting enough information, but not pushing people too hard in a way where they don't want to do it anymore, or they're sort of ignoring it, or just kind of throwing in, like just phoning it in and not really caring. So that's something too. I would just look for those moments where you feel like it's a bit too forced and contrived. Dave, is there anything else that we've not done anymore? I don't think so in this capacity.
What we backed off. I can't.
We used to do some small team offsites. I think those are still available. People can maybe do those. Like the support team might go away, or the ops team might go away on its own. We haven't really done much of that lately.
Yeah, that is an alternative to
Yeah.
do smaller things with people who are closer to each other, so it's cheaper. You don't have to
Right.
rent out big venues and so forth. Especially if you're in Europe and you can do things that don't require as much travel as we have to deal with. I think we gotta.
Sure.
Yeah, we
Up
got to
to
move
the-
on. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank
Ingmar.
you so much.
Okay, coming up next is Christian, who is joining us from London. Hello, Christian.
Hi, Kimberly, David. Yeah, honored to be here. My name is Christian. I'm originally from Copenhagen, so Danish as well, and now living in London, UK. And I'd like to ask some questions about productized services or one-style products versus typical SaaS solutions. So just over 5 years ago, I started my company Presso out of frustration with the event apps that was available for conferences. So I built this little networking tool where people could meet each other. And that gained some traction and some interest about it being built into more of a real event app, if you can say so. And I pitched the first idea of a PowerPoint presentation, and a company said, yeah, we'll buy that. So I had 4 months to build it. So quickly hire an outsourced team, got that built, got it to market. It wasn't really the most stable version. And then COVID came and killed the whole industry. So I saw that was a time to think about a rebuild. So I hired a new team from Ukraine. The war started. So I've been burned a few times with outsourcing. So last year I decided to learn Ruby on Rails, as David recommends. And I started building my own version from the bottom up, and now have a promising first version of a unified event platform where all organizers and attendees share just one app, so you don't have to download new ones all the time. But I hear a lot of people talking about the concept of productized services, and you, of course, with your once product, are now saying that, you could sell one solution that everyone could own on their own and host themselves. But I'm concerned, given I sell to event organizers who probably don't have the tools in-house or the teams to manage services themselves. So I've spoken to a few customers about and showing them the new platform that I've made, and they have all sort of shown preference towards having their own branded platform on their own domain. So I'm contemplating to start offering these dedicated versions of our app where they potentially pay a yearly fee and everything is included, hosting, support, service, everything. And then they just pay a bit extra for the usage. I don't think I can completely move to a pay once model, as I'm concerned, that they don't have the capacity to run this themselves. They might choose bad servers, and that will look bad on our brand, of course, that the app keeps crashing. So I'm really curious about your thoughts about the future of SaaS and the complications of introducing these dedicated customized installation in my case, or if I'm better off to stick with our existing SaaS type platform model. I'm a solo entrepreneur, so I'm just me.
Well,
Go ahead, David. Start.
yeah, I was going to say, first thing is we don't know. I mean, we just started selling things under once this year. So for us, we can't say like, well, this is the future or this is not the future. But I will say, I think you may be underestimating the capacity for someone to run their own stuff. First of all, 40% of the internet runs on WordPress. If you count just the number of domains, all of those installations run on people's own servers. They run with their own domains, they're set up, they are operated with people's own servers. So literally half the internet was able to figure that out. I think you might be underestimating whether your customers would be able to figure it out. And by the way, I don't know if you've looked at setting up WordPress. It's actually not that easy. It's actually fairly convoluted, whatever. I don't know if you've looked at once. We've boiled it down to one command. So that's not a guarantee of success. I'd just say I wouldn't look at it as a blocker. It's more whether the customers you have, if they feel like it's a value add. Can they see the advantages in running things on their own, or would they rather just have a SaaS solution? I think there's part of the equation here is if you're running events, a lot of folks who run events, they might run 1, 2, 4 events a year. They may not want a monthly subscription for that. That's a lot of months where you're not running your event. So I'd actually say the event space may be one that's more likely to fit with a pricing model that's not subscription software. It could be not just necessarily once, but could be once per event. Like there are other ways to do business models where you price it differently than just a recurring monthly subscription. So if you take that first, the technical part, and say, do you know what? I would say that's not the problem. The problem is whether the customer base you have any interest in doing that and see a value in it, most importantly. Are you giving them a problem or are you solving a problem for them? Whereas the way we position once is we're solving a problem for me. Allowing it to run it yourself gives you privacy. It gives you all of these advantages. It relieves you from having the monthly subscription. So you got to give people something back. If you're just saying like, hey, run it yourself. And then, by the way, also pay me every month, just like you would like, well, you're asking me to do both of the things, right? Like I'm getting the worst of both worlds. So you got to offer them something compelling for this approach to work. But then I would also think about like, could you charge on something that's associated with where they make their money? That's usually the best way to make money in any kind of software. Insert yourself somewhere in between directly where the transfer happened, right? So, okay, they're putting on an event, putting on that event. I don't know what kind of event organizers they are, but let's say it cost them $10,000 to do it. In an event budget, perhaps it doesn't look like so much to spend $500 on your thing for that event. And then knowing that you don't have to pay afterwards when there is no event, that there's no money coming in. This is usually where event organizations are very sensitive, right? They're sensitive. After the event is over, I don't want recurring costs. So you may very well find that your customers are going to do that to you anyway. They do that to us with Basecamp. We have freelancers who will sign up for Basecamp. They'll pay on a monthly while they have the clients. And then they'll go through a lull. I don't have the clients. I'm quitting anyway. So you can't just say like, well, it'd be very nice to get the money every month. Yeah, but if the customer can't get value out of it every month, they're not going to pay you anyway.
Yeah.
I have a few things to add if I could. Or do you want to follow up with David first?
No, I would just say on the SaaS style platform that we now have, where all organizers and attendees are in their own space, they do pay per attendee, so they only pay for usage. What I was thinking with a productized version is that we take a copy of what we have and then set up a server and run that for them. So we will charge like a few £1,000s a year for the software being their own. They will have their own website, which is also a marketing throughout the year. And we just support and maintain this for them. And then they can renew for another year if they're interested. And then they just pay for the extra cost of running the events. So it's basically buying a platform that is your marketing platform, and then you pay for the events running on them.
So I have a few things. Business model wise, I like the idea of SaaS for you at the moment, but basically in the off season, off events, the price drops significantly. It's more of a maintenance charge at that point, just to kind of keep old stuff around if you want. And then maybe, you know, it's whenever tickets go on sale or however this works, like then they basically have to buy, it's $500 or $1,000 or whatever, a one-time thing. So it is a bit of a combination there to some degree. What I don't, since you're a one-man shop right now, it sounds like, right?
Yeah.
I don't like the idea of you running and hosting like in a consulting style way for all these events. I think you're breaking off something very, very large that's going to be hard for you to chew by yourself. And especially when it comes to customization, which probably many of them are going to want to some degree. Now you're basically a consultant. Are you a software company or are you a consulting company? Because at that point, you're a consulting company. That's what consulting companies do. They basically get a retainer of some sort, and some of them make software for their clients and solve problems for their clients. But you're kind of on call the whole time, and you're making custom stuff, and it's a one-off for each one, even if the basic stuff's the same. I'd just be careful about getting involved with that. I think you're going to find yourself overwhelmed very quickly. Now, perhaps it might be, well, you can hire some people to deal with that. I don't really know. But I'd make this more of a software play and not a consulting play. To David's point, though, I agree that some events are going to be very, very comfortable. I mean, look, the other thing to think about events, think about what events do. So an event is catering, right? Which is hard. You hire someone else to do that. AV, you hire someone else. There's probably another firm that you hire to do get the Wi-Fi going and all the stuff. And there's like stage props and the whole thing. Like there's a lot of money being spent, and the expectation is that you know, there are experts who can do this sort of work. And so I do think this idea of them signing on with you to get the software that they're going to use for their event, like I think people are very comfortable spending money for that. That'd be my guess. The question is like, do people want to, after the event is over, is there anything that remains that's important? Or can it just be one-off payments? Could something exist for 90 days and then go away? I don't know. Or not. There's some questions there. I know I'm kind of going back and forth and some thinking here, but that's just kind of how the mind works.
I think the other part is to think about pricing in this regard. If you are going to make something that fits into an event budget, and those events are relatively large and they're commercial, and you are going to go the consultant-ish route, you got to charge consultant-ish prices. You cannot charge SaaS pricing. You cannot charge $15 per seat kind of pricing unless that adds up to literally thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars in total spend, because you're not going to have bandwidth to have that many clients. So the whole business is going to hinge on 10, 20, whatever, 30 clients, maybe. They got to pay you a lot. So sometimes where I've seen people go wrong is that they're applying the pricing model that fits for a different business. So they're trying to do SaaS when really what they're doing is kind of consulting, or they're trying the other way around. They're trying to way overcharge for some, or not overcharge. They're trying to charge consulting pricing for SaaS stuff, and that doesn't work either. Figure out which one you're going to do. And if you are going to go like, hey, do you know what? Actually, my moat is the consulting part, is that it's specialized, is that they can't buy this off the shelf anywhere else. Awesome. Great. Then, as Jason says, just embrace it. All right, I have more of a consulting business, a specialization business, than I have a software business. A software business is just like a leg to get onto that.
Okay, I have to chime in for 1 minute just because I have an event planning background before I worked here. And Christian, as I'm hearing you talk about pricing and about profitability of events, you might also consider charging per attendee. An event that has 200 people just looks a lot different than an event that has 2,000 people, and the number of dollars that are generated from something like that. So it's just another thing to consider so that you're not turning away people who are doing smaller events with a high ticket price. Similar to how we do at Basecamp, there's a per person price. If you have a small business, you're paying a lot less than someone who has a giant business. So just something else I had to chime in.
No, I appreciate that, Kimberly. One last thing I would say is like, you can also specialize on event size. You'd say like, we're the platform for events under 250 people, and try to like own that world versus like we service all size events. It's just kind of different events have different needs. So I'd be curious. I don't know. Again, I don't know if this is a good idea. I'm not in that world, but like the more specific you can get, perhaps the better off you can sell. Maybe, maybe not though. I don't know.
Yeah,
Is this
no, we
helpful at
are.
all? I don't know. We're kind of all over the place, but
It is. I am selling per attendee and 500 to 1,000 business only events. So they are fairly specialized, but it's good advice. And maybe if I could, maybe one for David, just out of interest. Could you share any advice or strategies of how to efficiently manage like updates and upgrades across if you had multiple services run? So similar like how you handle updates for Campfire. And is there any pitfalls in that regard when pushing upgrades to standardized service solutions?
I thought that was going to be really hard. I thought it was going to be one of the main technical challenges we were going to deal with the once lineup, and it turned out to be shockingly easy. The way we've done it is everything is built as a container, a Docker container, and that the setup script we have that run on each server simply ask our servers every night, is there a new version? If there's a new version, pull it down, do the upgrade. And that has turned out to be very sort of easy to do. I mean, again, devil's in the detail. You can break it. If you break their servers and you don't have access to those servers, that's kind of a hassle. But it doesn't sound like you're dealing with like tens of thousands of installations at the moment, or potentially. Then it's not really that big of a deal. That's the other thing, is sort of risk calibrate. Okay, if the worst thing happened and my update kind of breaks, I have to talk to 100 customers or 50 customers. Not the end of the world. I'll say, technically speaking, things have just moved forward. It's so much easier. If you tried to do this before containers, before Docker, before all that stuff, I would never, ever have recommended it. In fact, we've been asked for years and years to do a version of Basecamp that worked like this. We also always said no, because I couldn't see a way to do it where the support costs would not be outrageous. So, yeah, I think this is easier than ever. It still requires some... It's still easier to do SaaS in that regard. It's one server, you control it, whatever. So don't think it's like it's a shortcut. It's not in that regard. You do it for the business model.
One last thing I want to add, I know we need to move on. Sorry.
Yeah.
It's just like one other thing to think about in general for everybody listening is think about how the customer you're selling to buys other things. So I'm going to get back to something I said earlier. They have to they pay someone else to deal with the catering. They pay someone else to deal with the AV. They pay someone else to deal with the set design. Do they want to take on hosting their own infrastructure, or do they want to pay someone else to do that? If they're used to just paying other people and you're the one that sticks out as like, no, you got to do all this work yourself, even if it's not a lot of work, to David's point, it's not actually a lot of work, but they're going to think it is. I can see them going, this is going to be too hard, even if it's not. So if they're used to basically renting, I'd stay with a rental model, which is SaaS.
Yeah, cool.
Christian,
Well, thank you,
Cool.
David, and
Thank you.
Thanks for being with us. Okay, last guest with us is Aaron, who is coming to us from Idaho. Aaron, hello.
By the way, everyone who's watching, I think there's like 4,000 people on X right now. It's wonderful to see people tuning in. This is our first time we've ever done this. So,
Aaron, hello.
Hey, gents, great to meet you.
hey, Aaron.
Hello. Great to meet you. So my name is Aaron. I'm head of product at a company called Red Balloon. We're a free speech recruiting and software firm. And I'd love to rewind the clock for a minute back to 2021, that wonderful and heady time. So you all made serious waves by implementing a no politics at work policy. Which I think included quite a bit of short-term pain internally. Meanwhile, people like me, I was at a Fortune 100 company, and reading the news about that move, I mean, it was just incredibly encouraging, because here I am at kind of a bloated company, and there are political ideologies kind of being rammed down my throat all the time. By leaders that I would have assumed were otherwise thoughtful, but were kind of proving themselves not to be. And So kudos on that. Thank you for doing that and enduring that short-term pain. I guess my question is what's happened since then? What is your sense as to the mood of, the companies that you are connected to, the mood of peers, especially? I mean, I think we can all kind of see what's happening at the largest companies in the world, but in terms of just your average company trying to make it, is that catching on? Are you sensing more of an appetite for meritocracy than it looked like it was going to go previously?
Yeah, I think it's almost unrecognizable. The general atmosphere and what I hear from other company founders and executives from 3 years ago, it feels like literally it's been a decade and the winds have completely changed in all sorts of regards. And I think we've reached the point where it's no longer controversial. I think that's probably the best thing you can say about it. It's not controversial to say, hey, at our company, we leave societal politics at home or outside the workplace. And it used to be very controversial a short time ago. And the rate at which it's become non-controversial has been very encouraging. I've talked to a lot of other founders who've essentially more quietly than us adopted the same policy, and it wasn't that big of a deal. And now you have companies like Google and others adopting similar policies, and it's also not that big of a deal compared to what it was before. So yeah, I see the whole thing is trending so fast in what I would consider the right direction that at this point, I don't even know if we're going to be talking about it as anything but a historical weird time in another year or two, or maybe 3 at the most. So for us, it's just been absolutely bliss. I mean, contrasting the two cultures that we had, the before and the after, and especially now that there's distance to it and it's not even a factor, it's just so much better. And again, maybe there are individuals who wish things were otherwise or had disagreements with it, but the overall company culture and just spirit and feel of the place is just so much better. It's one of the top 3 decisions in the company's history, I would say. Now, what I would also say is that, do you know what? If I had known that it was going to be as painful as it was in the moment, maybe I would have gone hey, do you know what? Someone else can just do it first. We'll do it in a year when the price is much lower. We paid basically top of market for that decision, when if you do it now, you can get it at total bargain prices. It's a complete commodity. It's not a luxury decision at this point to make, which of course is just wonderful. And we've been on that with a lot of decisions. I mean, this is a controversial one. We've been there. SaaS, we were very, very early on SaaS. We had to convince people it was safe to put in their credit cards online. Been early on with Ruby. We've been early on with Ones. We've been early on with chat. We've been early on with a lot of things. So I think that's just kind of the price for being there, and it's fine. And hopefully, to some extent, as in your case, it helped expedite, perhaps in just a small degree, that we got to this place where we are now, which is wonderful. But do you know what? Honestly, I just can't wait until this is no longer even a conversation, because it didn't used to be. It used to be completely non-controversial, and it still is in lots of other places of the world. It's funny. I was actually, when this happened, I was in Denmark, and I talked to a lot of Danes about it, and they couldn't even understand it. It didn't even make sense. What do you mean? Why would you be talking politics like this at work? Why would that even come in? So that's the place. It'd be great if we just got there. It's just a no-brainer. This is just the standard norm. And maybe there are other companies where that's their business, right? Whatever, they're into advocacy or something else. Great, do that. And then for everyone else, the standard norm is just a reversion to a better time where this was self-evident that that's a bad idea to just invite that kind of division inside of your company. I think we're going to get there, and then we're just not going to talk about it. Let's talk about something new. I'm sick as hell of even talking about it now. We've been talking about it a lot. And I hope in 1, 2, 3 years, not even a topic worth discussing as anything but a historical curiosity where we go wow, that was really some crazy years, wasn't it? And then you just move on.
Yeah, a couple things I'll add. I don't have much more to add, but I'm looking at your site right now. It's very interesting, by the way. And you have like 4,000 jobs available. So like clearly there's a lot of companies out there that are looking for people who don't want to talk about that. They just want to focus on their work and focus on work ethic and just get work done and that whole thing. So it's actually a very interesting niche, by the way, that you've carved out for yourself. I don't know if there's other job boards that are doing this and sort of talking about it in this way. It's very interesting. So kudos to that. I would say the most important thing is really to figure out what you want to do. It's your company. And when I say you, I mean whoever is listening, who's an entrepreneur, who's a founder. The decision David and I made may not be the right decision for some other company and whatever. But what I hear about are a lot of companies who know the decision they want to make, but they're afraid to make the decision. And so they live in this perpetual state of dissatisfaction, and they feel like they're not even running their own company. That's a problem. So I don't personally care what side you're on in terms of, let's bring our whole selves to work. Let's just bring our work, whatever it is. Just do what you believe you should be doing. Make that very clear to everybody and do that. But the wrong place to be is in the middle where you're afraid. Do not run a company from a place of fear, and do not fear your own company. I mean, what is more terrible in the business sense than being afraid of the company that you've created? And we were at this place where we were a bit afraid, concerned, nervous. We didn't want to break things. And it was a shitty place to be. The decision was hard, but to be honest, the year and a half prior to that was worse, actually, in a lot of ways. And that we were like kind of putting up with stuff that we're like, what is going on? Are we just out of touch? Or like, what's happening? And then you realize, no, we weren't. They were, and we need to make a decision here to run our own business our own way and let the chips fall where they may. So I would just encourage people to do what they think is right about their own place, regardless of what that decision is. Just live fully in that way and don't pretend.
I think this really, to me, is very similar to the remote work question. We've been obviously big advocates for remote work, and yet I would not want every single company to be remote. Like, we need room for both companies and employees to self-select to some degree and say, like, you know what? I love working from home. I'm going to find me a remote work company that really embraces that. And that's 37 Signals, for example. Great. And then someone like Apple, for example, have a completely different culture where they rely on the in-person thing. That should be allowed to exist. And then people can self-select. And I think there's something to here. There are plenty of companies where literally the business is politics, or it's very politics adjacent, or whatever. Wonderful. Let all the folks who want to do that go work there. And then we will also have a bunch of companies like who just go like, yeah, that's not what we do. We do project management tools and email software like us. And like, that's what we're going to focus on. We're not going to chime in on all the other stuff that's going on. And then I think, again, not to both sides, everything, but there's room for companies to fall into different configuration camps. And I don't want the pendulum either to swing too far in the other direction, to the point that, like, also you can't have companies that are politically motivated or involved. Great, let's have that. It's like everyone's got to eat this. Everyone is just going to get it rammed down their throat in exactly the same way, and we're all going to eat, think, and work alike. No.
Yeah. Well, if I can ask a follow-up question.
Yep.
So, a culture in which you can have zero political conversations or zero conversations about, current topics, especially with the people that you're with, 40, 50, 60 hours a week, doesn't strike me as a particularly mature culture. Do you see a time where we could get back to, having just boundary lines? I think that's what normal people have, right? Is like, oh, we're at work. This is kind of getting over the edge. We're going to shut it down. Maybe we'll go out for a beer later. Do you think we can get back to that? And maybe I'd ask for 37 Signals, what have you done to not make it kind of a draconian atmosphere? Or have you had to do that? Have you had to like say, no, this is an absolute, draconian rule?
I don't think it's been draconian. We've had a couple of cases where things have veered in that direction, and it's just been a kind nudge of like, hey, you know what? Let's Let's just put a lid on that one and move on to something else. But I do actually think it is easier to keep relatively bright lines, because otherwise you get into a case-by-case basis very quickly. Oh, last week we were fine talking about X. Then this week we can't talk about Y. Y is the thing I really care about. Like, I didn't care that much about X. And I also think that's not that impressive. It used to literally be the standard almost everywhere that, like, while we're at work, while we're within the 8 hours that we're in the office as it used to be, we're not going to do that. But let's go out to lunch. At lunch with just 3-4 people that I know I can have these kind of discussions with, totally fine. In our case, the problem was a lot of these discussions would literally suck in the whole company. Like, it's even difficult to imagine in a physical office how that would even happen. Imagine like 2 people sitting and talking, and all of a sudden there's 40 people around 2 tables arguing virulently in one direction or the other. That just sounds like madness. And it was madness, right? So this idea that you can have conversations that are difficult or political or whatever with your coworkers and your friends. A lot of people have friends at work. It's totally fine. Let's just not do it like in the office while we're sitting and working. Let's do it at lunch. Let's do it on Fridays. Let's do it playing soccer. Let's do it somewhere else that's not in the work time. I think having quite clear, bright lines about that is going to make it easier. And I've applied the same thing to myself. Jason did as well. Like, there are things I could remember bringing up topics 10 years ago I would not bring up today, because I could just see, do you know what? It could go in that direction. I'm just not going to do that. I'm going to talk about it on my, I don't know, newsletter or somewhere else, or privately with friends, or on a side channel. We have all these opportunities for side channels. Use them. It doesn't all have to happen at work. And I don't think that's draconian at all. I think that's just like a norm. We have a norm at the company that we don't do that. And sometimes people maybe veer up against the line of that norm and you let something slide. But like, you also kind of have to, at some point, enforce the norm to make sure that it stays the norm. Otherwise, it just, yeah.
I'll
Nothing more
also
to
jump
add
in
there.
on this.
Fantastic.
Our job
ahead, Kimberly.
descriptions now have a blurb about that. So when you're even seeing a job opening at 37 Signals, you see in that job description that we have a policy about not talking about politics at work. So from the beginning, I think you're kind of setting that tone as well.
And I think that was the most painful part to some extent, that what we had before was a misunderstanding of what sort of the lines were, the norms were. And when you try to enforce a norm that wasn't present before, like, that's where it's going to hurt. And that's why it's been so blissfully non-eventful afterwards, because literally every person we hired since saw that and went like, okay, cool, I'm still going to apply. And probably we had also some applicants who saw that and went like, nope, that's not where I want to work. I want to freaking talk politics, the whole self, all the things. And they went somewhere else, and both parties won, right? Like, we ended up with a company culture we wanted. That person went somewhere else where they could find what they were looking for. Wonderful. That's how the free market is supposed to work.
Aaron, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your question. You guys, we did such a great job keeping on time. Thanks for joining
Thanks
us
to you,
live.
Kimberly. By the way, you
Oh,
organized this whole thing. You
no.
lined everything up. David and I just showed up. This is the first
Well-
time we've done this. I know it's complicated to stream on multiple platforms, so good
But it
job
worked.
on that. Yeah.
That's
So
awesome.
listen, I don't know if we'll do this again, but if we do, I've seen a couple of people posting questions on LinkedIn and YouTube live, asking questions that they want to pose to you. We did a call for questions last week and said, if you want to ask us a question live, fill this out so that we can, do all the back prep to get you on stage. So next time we do that, just be on the lookout for that. We'll do a call for questions again, and then select a handful of people to join us live. You guys, thanks for this.
Thank
This
you.
was fun.
Excellent.
And
Thanks everybody who
guys,
watched.
have a great
too.
rest of your day.
Yeah.
Yeah.